Abraham's Calling, a Journey of Faith. Based on Genesis chapter 12 verses 1 to 9. 1. God's call to Abraham. The story begins with a man named Abram, who lived in the city of Ur, in the land of the Chaldeans. Ur was a prosperous city, but it was also filled with idolatry and false worship. Despite this, God chose Abram for a great purpose. One day, the Lord spoke to Abram. "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." Genesis chapter 12 verses 1 to 2. At that time, Abram was 75 years old. Most people at that age would think about retirement, not starting over, even more challenging. God did not tell him exactly where he was going, he simply said, "Go." Key point. God did not give Abram a clear map, he simply called him to step forward in faith. In return, God promised to make him the father of a great nation and that all the nations of the world would be blessed through him. 2. Abram's obedience. Without hesitation, Abram obeyed God. He gathered all his belongings, took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his servants, and left everything behind. What's remarkable is that Abram didn't know where he was going. Yet he still stepped out in faith, trusting that God would guide him. Lesson. True faith is not about knowing every detail, but trusting God even when we don't see the destination. 3. Arriving in the Promised Land. After a long journey, Abram and his people arrived in Canaan. At a place called Shechem, the Lord appeared to him and said, "To your descendants, I will give this land." Genesis chapter 12 verse 7. At that time, the Canaanites were still living there, but God had already promised that this land would belong to Abram's descendants. Abram built an altar to worship God, expressing his gratitude and trust in him. Lesson. When God blesses and leads us, we should respond with worship and gratitude. 4. The first test, a journey to Egypt. Not long after arriving in Canaan, a severe famine struck the land, so Abram took his family to Egypt to find food. However, in Egypt, Abram faced a new fear. Sarai was very beautiful, and he worried that the Egyptians might kill him to take her. Instead of trusting God, Abram tried to solve the problem on his own by lying. He told Sarai, "Say you are my sister so that I will not be killed." Sure enough, when the Egyptian officials saw Sarai, they took her to Pharaoh's palace. Pharaoh even gave Abram many gifts and riches. But God sent plagues upon Pharaoh's household, making him realize that Sarai was actually Abram's wife. Pharaoh immediately confronted Abram. "Why did you lie to me? Take your wife and leave at once." So Abram and his family were sent out of Egypt. Lesson. When facing trials, don't rely on your own wisdom, trust in God instead. Even when we make mistakes, God can still restore us and lead us back to the right path. 5. Returning and continuing the journey of faith. After leaving Egypt, Abram returned to Bethel. There, he built another altar and called upon the name of the Lord. Even though he had failed once, Abram continued to walk in faith, trusting in God's guidance. Life applications. 1. Obey God, even when you don't see the full picture. Abram didn't know where he was going, but he trusted God. Sometimes, God calls us to step out of our comfort zones and walk by faith. 2. When God blesses you, give him the glory. Abram built altars to worship God whenever he received guidance. We should also thank God in every situation. 3. Don't let fear lead you to make poor decisions. When Abram went to Egypt, he was afraid and lied instead of trusting God. When facing difficulties, remember that God is always faithful. 4. Even when you fail, God can restore and guide you back. Even though Abram made mistakes, God still kept his promises and led him forward. Conclusion. Abram's journey was not just a trip from Ur to Canaan, it was a journey of faith. He was an ordinary man, but God used him for an extraordinary purpose. If God is calling you to step out in faith today, are you willing to obey like Abram did? Trust in God, even when you don't see the whole path ahead.